And Erin, you're muted.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Toby. Thank you for the introduction and for involving us with the event this evening. I'm so pleased to be able to participate in this and join you for this announcement and official launch of the Blue Venture Forum. The blue economy is extremely important to the greater Newport region with a direct to our coast and a focus on our primary industry sectors, including ocean, defense, marine trades, tourism and recreation, fisheries, aquaculture, and renewable energy. Considering Rhode Island has 400 miles of coastline, the blue economy is a vital component of the state and greater Newport's economy, with an estimated nearly 9% of the state's GDP totaling $5.2 billion and accounting for 35,000 jobs. When tourism is included, the blue economy produces $2.8 billion in wages. 24% of jobs in greater Newport, or 13,000, are in the blue economy compared to 14% in Rhode Island. And in 2020, the greater Newport region had 439 blue economy establishments, with the largest number of these businesses being concentrated in IT software, cyber physical systems and defense, shipbuilding, and maritime sub-industries. The Chamber and Innovate Newport are dedicated to helping to grow this sector for our region and to make Newport the center of excellence for the blue economy by raising awareness of the opportunity of the blue jobs in our community, supporting entrepreneurs and innovations in the blue tech space, and offering comprehensive programming to startups and businesses looking to scale up. We know the Blue Venture Forum, in partnership with Innovate Newport, will help to build the blue ecosystem with regular pitch events, the development of international partnerships with other organizations, and ultimately attracting businesses and talent to our region to work in this space. Thank you again, Toby, for your efforts in launching this important initiative in Greater Newport with the Chamber, and to all of the sponsors of this program. We look forward to supporting this initiative as it grows, and also for the excellent programming that you have planned tonight. I look forward to hearing from all of the other speakers as well, and look forward to participating and supporting this effort as we move forward. Thanks, Toby.
Thank you, Erin. And again, thank you for your support and the Chamber's leadership on this. I also want to thank, lastly, the Blue Innovation Symposium and my co-organizers, Roger Race, who is the Director of Innovation for Dartmouth Ocean Technology, and Justin Manley, the CEO and founder of Just Innovation, for their help, not only with the Blue Innovation Symposium, but the help that they've provided in getting the Blue Venture Forum off the ground. So the Blue Venture Forum, is the reason we created the Blue Venture Forum here is for a number of reasons, and not the least of which is that we have a strong, dense, and diverse blue tech ecosystem here. As Erin described, not only are we close to the entire region on the water, but we have key assets, particularly in the areas of defense and research, that lead the innovation and innovation developments throughout industry sectors like defense, which, because of the Naval Undersea Warfare Center and Naval Station Newport, and even the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, the University of Rhode Island, and even the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, drive the research and innovation that goes into next generation developments in autonomous systems, sensors, and related platforms. And of course, we have up and coming industries that everyone has heard about, like offshore wind, which is driving a lot of excitement in the industry sector, as well as the marine renewable energy, which we don't hear as much about. But marine renewable energy includes things like wave energy converters and hydrokinetic technologies that we're seeing the Department of Energy, for instance, fund SBIR or SBIR activity. And of course, underwater robotics, which we're going to hear from one of the premier, or at least one of the companies that's making a lot of waves, figuratively speaking, in the underwater robotics or underwater autonomous vehicle sector later on in the program. And of course, sensors. And when we look at around what's happening around the globe, it is true that around the U.S. and the world, economic development organizations are now focused on the blue economy, which means that over the last 6 years, there's been a proliferation of activity and new organizations to support blue tech firms, both here in New England and across the U.S. But despite this activity, promising blue tech firms are still challenged to find funding and get help. And paradoxically, investors and corporates are challenged to find investment and acquisition opportunities. Because of that, we created the Blue Venture Forum, which is to serve as a platform for connecting scale-up blue technology companies who are beyond the prototype stage with investors and leading corporates, including and primarily the primes, the companies that are driving the defense sector, but also key governmental stakeholders in environment, such as NOAA, in defense, particularly the Navy, and energy through the Department of Energy. And what are we going to do? So there's three primary activities that the Blue Venture Forum will be undertaking over the course of the year. The first is programming, and that's what we're participating in tonight through our inaugural programming. The programming is intended to help scale up blue technology companies understand the nuances of working with a prime or the corporates, as well as when and how to work with equity investors such as venture capital or angels. On the other side of that, though, we are hoping to use the platform as a method for educating the industry, educating investors, including those angels and primes, about what blue technology means, what the markets look like, and what the scale of the investment opportunity is. In addition to that, working closely with the Chamber and other partners, we'll be working to deliberately connect through matchmaking the primes with the investors, with the scale-up companies, so that we're enabling or creating a more efficient platform for connecting those technology developers with the right partner, whether it's a funding partner, a research partner, or a go-to-market partner. And then lastly, it's showcasing. We want to make sure that we are showcasing those up-and-coming technologies, whether they are fully baked companies or a particular piece of technology that is applicable in the maritime or the blue economy space. And so what we are looking to do, particularly through the Blue Innovation Symposium, is to deliberately showcase these technology developers in a series of flash talks, which will then hopefully allow us to connect them through matchmaking, again, deliberate matchmaking. Okay, and so why now? It's because we've had, as some of you know, some success with the Blue Innovation Symposium. 6 years ago, I should say over the last 6 years, the Blue Innovation Symposium has become the largest blue technology conference in New England and brings together more than 300 participants each year and 50 corporate sponsors and roughly 40 to 50 speakers over the course of the 3 days. And those speakers come from organizations like NOAA, the Office of Naval Research, the Navy, NUIC, and so on, to talk about their needs, but also to listen to the technology developers talk about the things that they're developing either in the lab or in the shop. And so with that, leading into our program, I want to say a big thank you to Innovate Newport and the Chamber for allowing us. As many of you know, we sold out our Zoom license within roughly a week of going live with the Eventbrite page. And to the rescue, Innovate Newport came in with their YouTube channel. So hopefully it sounds like we have our YouTube channel up and running and we are streaming. And I just got a thumbs up from our IT friend, Nick, who says everything is working great. So with that, I want to say thank you to Innovate Newport. And again, stay tuned for blue technology programming through them. Through the Blue Venture Forum here at Innovate Newport. And that leads us into our program, Venture Capital and Blue Technology. I'm pleased to be joined by Jerry Scobo, the Chief Financial Officer of Dive Technologies tonight. Dive is, for those of you who follow the industry, Dive has over the course of the last year, have been doing a lot of great things that have gotten attention throughout, sort of the trades, as we call them in blue tech. So magazines like Sea Technology Magazine, Ocean News and Technology, and MTR, and so on. But also in the popular press. And if you follow them on LinkedIn, you know that they're very active, actively engaged in LinkedIn about the news, about what they're doing. So first, Jerry, welcome, and thank you for participating in the Blue Venture Forum's first program.
Yeah, thank you, Toby. Very excited to be here, and happy to be talking tonight about Dive Technologies and specifically fundraising and capital raising for startups in the blue technology space.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. And so, Jerry, let's start off. Let's start by tell us about Dive Technologies. What are you developing? Jerry, you're muted.
There we go. Is that better?
Great.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so Dive Technologies is an autonomous underwater vehicle startup located in the Boston area. We're in Quincy, Massachusetts, and we have developed what we call a large displacement autonomous underwater vehicle. So to kind of put it in perspective, it's about 20 feet long and about 4 feet in diameter. So it's a fairly large autonomous system. Kind of resembles a mini submarine or a swimmer deliver vehicle, if you're familiar with some of those U.S. Navy assets. And it's really meant to go very long range, operate at full ocean depth, so down to 6,000 meters. And it has a very large payload capability or capacity in the vehicle. So we really intended it to be flexible to carry, a diverse set of payload packouts, depending on the use case and customer needs.
Great, Jerry. And so, Jerry, tell us about the team. What does the team look like, and what led you and your other co-founders to start Dive?
Yeah, sure. So the Dive was started by three co-founders, myself, Bill Lebo, and Sam Russo. Previously, we were all employees at Bluefin Robotics, and then General Dynamics Mission Systems after the acquisition. Bill was kind of we call kind of the platform manager for the 21-inch diameter class of vehicle that Bluefin developed and commercialized. And that platform had a lot of use cases. So it's 21 inches in diameter. It looks like a torpedo. It was involved in the Malaysia Flight 370 search, which got a lot of publicity a few years ago. It also had a number of military applications, including the program I worked on, and Sam worked on as well, which was Knifefish, which adapted that platform for a mine countermeasure mission. When we were at Bluefin, we started to kind of get our minds around what we thought next generation AUV platform should look like, and we were, we understood like the capabilities of kind of the medium weight, deep water capable survey assets. So things like, Remus 6000, Bluefin 21, Hugin vehicles. But we also kind of recognized that there was an opportunity to scale up the vehicle size in a way that you could still build and operate them at low cost. And we felt like there were emerging opportunities in both the commercial markets and things like offshore wind and in defense that kind of skewed towards needing longer range, longer endurance platforms, platforms that could potentially operate from a shore base and transit under their own power to a survey site and in return in kind of a fully autonomous con-op. So we were really excited or interested in pursuing that. And in 2018, we decided to start Dive Technologies to develop that very platform.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. Jerry, so tell us, before we get to the discussion about venture capital and why and how you decided to pursue venture capital, what did the initial startup look like? Was it, the Friends, Founders, and Fools round of funding? Was it more? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a friends and family round to start. And we kind of set a goal for a minimum amount of capital we need to raise to start Dive Technologies, and it was largely through our networks that we were able to piece together our first fundraise, and I think that's fairly typical for most startups that are like in their infancy. The funding mechanism was what was called a convertible note, which is it's essentially a debt instrument that converts to equity, but it doesn't have a valuation assigned to it because the companies are generally so early on, you can't assign a meaningful valuation. So a convertible note essentially gives those early investors a discount off of the next financing round where a valuation does get assigned, and it's typically like 10 or 20%. I think ours was 20%.
Right. Yeah. And thanks, Jerry, for that insight. So you use friends and family to raise that initial capital to get going, and then at some point you must have realized that you had to bring, or you were looking for additional dollars to bring in. Is that when you started to think about venture capital, or how did the idea of pursuing venture capital, and why maybe did you decide to go the venture capital route?
Yeah, definitely. If you're, I would say most companies that are developing some kind of new technology are going to need access to capital, and you're probably not going to be generating sales or meaningful sales early on because you need to first develop your technology, and there's kind of limited options in the capital markets to raise money outside of private risk capital for that type of business. If you were going to kind of open up a coffee shop, there's plenty of SBA type loans that you can go and get, and you can rent out a storefront and buy some brewers and tables and whatever inventory you need, and you can be kind of up and running in a matter of days, and that's a very bankable, underwritable business proposition. But as soon as you get into kind of startup technology development type propositions, the uncertainty around the business drives you to really a different kind of capital raising process.
Right. Yeah. And actually, that's a great segue. So tell us what the process of raising that venture background looked like. What
Mhm.
how did you identify the VC to work with, or was it a matter of shopping the pitch deck around? Did you nurture personal connections, as you mentioned before, in the friends and family round? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of give you our kind of the timeline that we operated on. We raised our convertible note, and it took us about 6 months to kind of get all the money in on that. And that kind of bought us about 10 months of runway. So we knew we were going to need to raise money again, because we didn't have a lot of sales, or really any sales at that point. But kind of the first things we did was like put a little bit of a higher level strategy around when we thought we would need money, and then kind of what that use of funds would look like. And in general, the way we've operated, and I think what a lot of VCs or investors will tell you is kind of raise for 12 to 18 months of operations, identify milestones, 2 or 3 milestones maybe in that time period that are going to drive your valuation higher. So that could be like, building a prototype, or maybe getting some early customer traction, or, hitting a technology readiness level with your technology, or even, getting a provisional patent filed on something that's critical IP. So the kind of the process was to start with was kind of figure out like, how much runway we were trying to buy with a funding with what became our seed round, and then also identifying what milestones we had to hit that would then propel us into the next round, and would also drive our valuation, and then just in general, just be very capital efficient with the money that you take in. And that's always been kind of our philosophy, is to raise what we need with enough cushion in case things don't go well, but not necessarily raise more than we need. And that's definitely there's a kind of a delicate balance around that, but that's it. It allows you to stay focused. I think it's our opinion, and it also allows you to not get diluted down very quickly early on, such that future rounds become more challenging because of the amount of equity or control you might have over your company.
Right. Yeah. In fact, that's I want to ask a question about the difference. Now, you've raised now 2 tranches of venture capital funding, a seed round and a Series A round, if I've got that correct. And I want to talk about the differences between those rounds. But before we get there, when you were initially presenting to the VCs, how was it challenging to present what you were doing, and how did you get them to get it? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I would say it was when we went through this process in the seed stage rounds, it was challenging. We found we made our way to a lot of funds that maybe weren't very well aligned with blue technology type investments, and that's really kind of a hard sell if you're not in kind of their core area of interests. you're probably not going to have a lot of success there. So we and I think a lot of people probably go through this, where you pitch a lot of funds, not really knowing what their interest is. We pitched a lot of funds that had interest in robotics, but it was often terrestrial robots, or at the time, 3 years ago, warehousing robots was really kind of the conventional wisdom. Felt like that was going to be a huge market, just because of what Amazon does, with all their distribution centers. So that was challenging, talking to people that don't have interest, or maybe have kind of an outside interest, but aren't maybe going to necessarily materialize into serious investors. What we did find eventually was a little bit off of pure VC funds, but we actually got interest through a number of family offices, and family offices essentially the assets of a family that's kind of a high net worth family, or it could be one person or many people, and they often invest in early stage venture capital, because they're interested in diversifying their portfolios, and venture capital has done extremely well over the last several decades as an asset class. So they're very active, and you'll find in those categories there's a lot of interest in blue tech, at least that we found, and it just required getting networked into the right people. But that was kind of the lead investor for our seed round, and then our second round were both we call family office investors. So that was it's kind of a meandering process. I'm sure many startups have a similar story, and it did take some time early on. I think the seed stage is the hardest stage to raise money for any venture, just because you're really new, you're very unproven. You're really kind of raising on the strength of the core team, and the potential of the market that you're going after. And those, if those two things aren't right, most investors won't want to get involved. But if you can tell a compelling story around those two areas, then you just have to kind of get people to understand your technology, and where you bring a competitive advantage to the market.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks, Jerry. It is one of the things I think we've seen over the last 6 years, is that, 6 years ago, the way you built a blue technology startup was friends and family, and an SBIR or a SIBR that would help, because typically, back then we were looking at, blue tech companies, and still today, that are founded by people who are technically proficient. They're engineers or they're scientists, and so they're building a vehicle or a platform. And today, I think what we've seen is, over those 6 years, we've seen some exits, and the exits are helping to, essentially set valuations and create benchmarks for the industry. One thing, Sir Jerry, that now that you've raised these 2 rounds, were they significantly different between the rounds in terms of proving the market or valuation and things like that? And if so, could you tell us about that?
Yeah, definitely, Toby. And I do want to just echo what you said there, with the kind of track record of blue technology over maybe the last 4 years is definitely making it easier for people to raise money. And I'll just point out, I think Saildrone raised $100 million recently. And they're backed by Lux Capital out of New York, which is one of the largest funds in the country. And there's others that have that are on a really kind of high flying trajectory in this space. So that kind of publicity helps a lot if you're just starting out today, because people look at that and now they have some kind of comparable data points that they can look at and understand that, hey, you know, what you're doing could be that company that is, you know, getting valued at $500 million. I don't know what they got valued at, but I can kind of guess if you raise $100 million, you're at least $500 million company. But so that is definitely changing things. And to your point, there's been a number of exits too. That again, you're starting to have like some real history in the industry that people focus on. And I think it just generally helps everybody. As far as the seed round versus the Series A round, definitely when we got our vehicle in the water last year in August of 2020, it made a lot of things a lot easier, and particularly fundraising. And because we were able to show success in the actual operating environment, which took us a little while to get to because we built a big vehicle, which is, you know, takes time and money to get up and running. We were able to start generating meaningful sales. So that kind of valuation point in a seed round, it's a lot of art and science, and a little bit of science, I would say. Most seed stage companies, you're going to get valued somewhere below $10 million, just because it's really hard to put anything more meaningful on you as a company. And so if you can get that money at that seed stage round, it's just consider it a success. But like the valuation it really doesn't mean much at that point still. We got valued at $8.5 million. That wasn't anything real. We could never sell the company at $8.5 million. It was kind of an arbitrary number, but it just kind of plants a flag in the ground. At least it allowed us to convert all those convertible note holders into actual shares at a real price. And it kind of just sets you up to like continue to grow. The Series A is much different. You know, we have tangible sales. So then it's just a question of what kind of multiple do I put on your sales to come up with your valuation, based on how much you want to raise, and as an investor, how much of the company do I want to own? And that's kind of where the negotiation lives is, well, I think I'm a 15 times revenue multiple and you think I'm a 10 times revenue multiple, and we'll negotiate that. And it's a little bit easier to get your mind around, and that's kind of how that process plays out. So I would say they're quite a bit different in both kind of the approach and the messaging, and then how a deal gets constructed.
Right. Yeah. And that, you know, that I think is insightful. And, you know, so in terms of the valuations in the due diligence process, you know, when you guys, went to, you know, either for either round, did you have a particularly strong opinion about what the valuation should be, or was there more of a give and take with the investor, where the investor, after a due diligence process or taking a look at this, was able to bring to you what they thought a fair valuation was? What did that look like in terms of a back and forth?
Yeah, so we typically negotiated valuation at the term sheet early on, and then the diligence phase was just to do a more thorough look at the company to make sure there wasn't anything there weren't any, potential red flags, and the information that had been presented in the negotiation process was actually, based on fact and all checked out, with the investor expectations. We did not negotiate valuation after the term sheet was signed. And I would say one of the other things that we had a lot of help with is we had very good support with our general counsel, who has a lot of experience in negotiating venture deals. So that really kind of took a lot of pressure off of us. Most entrepreneurs have never gone through fundraising. It's your first time. You're sitting across the table from people who've done it, maybe hundreds of times, if not more.
Right.
So there's kind of an unfair advantage there, and with good counsel, you can kind of neutralize that and make sure that investors stay on script and things kind of move smoothly through that diligence process.
Got it. Yeah. And so I think one of the things that we're also seeing in the ecosystem, kind of, again, not just here in New England, but across the board, is, the accelerator programs are working either specifically with blue tech, or deep tech companies. And because it is challenging, particularly in blue, but other deep tech verticals, that to create a compelling narrative around what they're doing, and then to arrive at a valuation is sometimes challenging based on what they're doing. Unlike a B2C company or something that might have even, sort of the warehouse robotics example that you gave at the beginning. I think it's easier in some cases to set a valuation or better understand from a VC's perspective what that might look like in terms of the market and the size of the market. When you look back on that process, knowing what you know now, sort of what would you have advised yourself back then before you started, either round or in general, before you got started?
Yeah, definitely. So I will say, and I was going to mention accelerators, because if you have the opportunity to get involved with an accelerator, I'd strongly recommend it. I think there's a number of good ones. Mass Challenge is excellent. Techstars is another. We actually went through Creative Destruction Lab, which is for the Ocean Stream, located up in I guess Halifax, Nova Scotia. Actually, Justin Manley was one of our mentors for a while. Those are outstanding opportunities to kind of go through a structured program that helps you build out and grow your company through kind of a more formal process. And I think if you make it all the way through one of those programs, you're very much already been vetted and diligenced.
Yep.
For a lot of investors. So that's really kind of the part of the value proposition with those programs. But kind of other things that I would say to think about is, I would say, the types of investors that you want. There's a number of angel groups that have a blue tech focus that didn't necessarily exist a few years ago, and those are all like definitely people that you'd want to talk to. Academic institutions often have some sort of venture arm or angel group, or kind of that are kind of in the orbit of the university. And we actually raised a fairly significant amount of capital from Virginia Tech's investment fund.
Right.
And then through your network, there's a lot of universities that kind of do the same thing. And then you also mentioned like non-dilutive capital, like SBIRs and grants, and those types of, those are great, because every investor likes to see somebody investing alongside of them, de-risking the business. And if they see the government, either a state government or federal government through an SBIR, bringing capital into the business, that definitely helps you tell your story.
Great.
And then I think when you go to pitch, you just have to have a very crisp story about your team, your technology, and your market. And I think you have to understand how that. I think you have to be able to communicate how your business is scalable, because that is kind of one thing that risk capital is going to want. So they're going to want to understand that if you sell, a large quantity of your product or your service, it can grow into, large sales numbers. If your business end game is, I'm going to have, $100,000 in sales in 5 years, you're going to have a hard time convincing people that that's an investable business. So you have to be able to explain like that there's a large market, you have a viable path to capture a significant piece of it, and you bring something that your competitors don't bring, and therefore you're going to capture sales that could get into tens or hundreds of millions of dollars potentially.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I want to just take a pause there and say, I think if Jerry's okay with this, we can take questions. And so if there's questions from the audience, our IT director has told me that you can click on reactions, and then he will unmute you and you can ask your question directly to Jerry. If anyone is interested in talking to Jerry about Dive and specifically about their experience with venture capital. While we're waiting, one of the things, looks like we do have one. So great.
Is this the hand from Ian?
It's Ian.
Okay.
There
we go.
Hey, Jerry.
Hey, Ian.
I first want to say what you guys are doing at Dive is fantastic for the industry. And I think your customers, right, in that world, you're kind of expanding their horizons. So awesome job. I got a pretty simple question. When you started your friends and family, you opted for a convertible note, and I wonder why you didn't go down the safe route.
That's a great question. I would say I should have a really crisp answer for that, but it was the path that our general counsel, directed us down, and I'm not sure I have a better answer than that, unfortunately.
Because we're in that spot right now, right? Gyrobotics is kind of like in that initial stage. So okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know a lot of companies do safe notes, and I think that I don't think they're that much different than a convertible note, but I think that there's a few subtle distinctions that unfortunately I'm not that intelligent on.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, sure.
Good
Thanks,
job.
Ian. And and so I think one of the things that's also driving investor interest in the space is that we're seeing not only valuations, and so companies being acquired, and we have essentially a benchmark to compare these investments to, but we're also seeing a lot of excitement in sort of space investments. And so everyone from Bloomberg to others have been focusing on the investment activity there, particularly SPACs in the space world. But in blue tech, Jerry, there's some challenges that we talk about as an industry, that more people have walked on the surface of the moon than the bottom of the ocean. We've mapped more of Mars than we have our oceans, the bottom of our oceans. Is that narrative helpful to you in sort of creating that compelling picture to investors, or is that not yet part of the discussion?
It's definitely helpful to kind of set the stage and capture people's imagination, but we found that you have to follow through with like the kind of so what piece to that, and who is interested in the ocean that is going to pay money for you to send for us, in our case, send an autonomous underwater vehicle 6,000 meters deep to survey the seafloor. And what I will say is, fortunately, that list of people has grown substantially over the last 4 years. You mentioned offshore wind at the beginning, Toby, and that's a huge market that is now a real thing. It didn't exist, 5-10 years ago, or it was so far away that it was hard to invest in it for a blue tech company. But there's huge opportunities there. We have a pretty strong beachhead in defense, and the geopolitical realities of the world today are pushing a lot of interest in blue tech, right? I mean, on the surface or subsurface of the oceans has a lot of interest from a national security perspective, and I would say that just has grown significantly in the last 4 or 5 years, and then even things like oil and gas. There may not be a lot more exploration, but there's thousands of miles of pipeline that need to be inspected, from a maintenance and environmental protection standpoint. Case in point, the pipeline in California that they think got dragged by an anchor and then released a lot of oil into the ocean.
Right.
Those types of infrastructure challenges are going to exist for many years to come, and all of those kind of use cases are going to be fertile ground for new and interesting solutions to those problems in the oceans. So I think that the markets in use cases are growing, and therefore I think the opportunities in blue tech are growing as well.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Jerry. And we're right up against time. I wanted to say, first of all, thank you. But I think everything that sort of the advice and explaining Dive's journey with venture capital is helpful, particularly as we see a new batch of blue technology companies and verticals, right? So we're seeing supportive verticals like power, battery, and power systems. We're seeing artificial intelligence and machine learning, so AI and ML, and sensors. We're seeing a new generation of sensors that power those vehicles and support those vehicles and really enable those vehicles to do the things that you need to, whether it's weather monitoring or anti-submarine warfare or everything in between. So I think it's great to hear Dive's story and appreciate you being the inaugural speaker today. And on behalf of the organization, I see a couple thumbs up. And so thanks, Jerry. We'll give the last word to you. Any last words, Jerry, before we sign off?
No, just really happy to have the opportunity to talk. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or over email, and I'm happy to help out in any way.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. And thanks everyone for participating again in our kickoff meeting of the Blue Venture Forum. We'll be posting a link to this recording of today's session on a number of platforms, including the Blue Venture Forum's website, which we'll be sending out in the next Blue Innovation Symposium newsletter, which we'll add you to. So with that, thanks again, everyone. Thanks to our sponsors, the Van Buren Charitable Foundation, DTN Ventures, and the Marine and Oceanographic Technology Network, and of course, the Greater Newport Chamber of Commerce for all of their support. So thanks, everyone, and have a great night.